Good morning, everyone. Welcome into this Tuesday morning. It's Tuesday, so we're going to get into the loaded and rolling community update this morning with the one and only Thomas Wasson, the host of Loaded and Rolling, the show and the newsletter and the podcast. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Pleasure to be on. You know, we got Halloween coming up, a lot of spooky stuff, but I'm out here with treats and not tricks. That's the important.
Ooh, we all love a treat. We don't like tricks.
No,
we do like treats.
That's for later.
And one treat that was recently released was ATRI's critical issues in the trucking industry, going over the top 10 for truck drivers, motor carriers. The number one that we see for truck drivers is truck parking, and the number one that we see for motor carriers is the economy. But Thomas, is there anything about this list that maybe surprised you? Something that you thought might have been a little higher on the list, or something that you thought should have been on the list for either one of these sides?
Well, it's a fascinating list. What we're looking at here, I had to pull it up because I'm going to remember all this off the top of my head, of course. But for drivers and motor carriers, these lists typically show that there's a difference. And so the priorities of what the drivers are worrying about in the motor carriers, that's a common thing among ATRI reports. And so for this one, the top 5 for drivers was truck parking, compensation, economy, detention and delay, and speed limiters. But when you look at the motor carriers, they're actually more concerned about the economy, lawsuit abuse reform, the driver shortage, insurance cost, and retention. So one of the interesting facts that had recently shown up, driver retention, is the first year that it was not a top 10 combined concern. And so there's also a combined industry concern. A few other interesting things that I noticed was that the addition of electric vehicles, which has also battery electric vehicles, has made it on the list at number 8. And so we're seeing some structural changes in terms of industry concerns. But the fascinating one is it does remain. Trucking's unique. You know, truck parking's number 1, but it's not like your carrier's going to buy you truck spaces in terms of, I'm just going to open up a parking lot for my drivers. And so it's one of those evergreen problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I think one of the things that really surprised me the most, that on either side, neither one of them had freight fraud on here. And I think we've seen freight fraud kind of climb a lot here in the past couple of years. And for it not to be for, I know, more motor carriers, but, you know, is that something that you thought would maybe be on the list, or should have maybe cracked the top 10?
I think maybe by next year. Now, if you're at a large motor carrier, freight fraud is not the end of the world because you're the asset. This is a problem for brokerages and shippers because shippers are using more brokerages who are using more carriers, and we're adding an extra a dimension of trying to figure out trust. I think it will become an issue because more nearshoring. So we're going to hear more reports of fraud from Mexico and stuff. And you'll have people tell you it's perfectly safe, but those people also want to sell you freight in and out of Mexico. So, you know, always understand, well, why would you decide to call out the fraud numbers in Mexico and say it's more safe? Well, that's because you want more business there. I have no such, I don't get paid any bit extra when that freight comes in and out of Mexico. So personally, I think that is going to be an issue probably in the next year or two as we start dealing with that situation. But for right now, it's definitely a broker and a shipper concern. If you have sketchy random, that's why it's such a big deal for the brokerages, because they're just not vetting their carriers. And they get mad. They get surprise Pikachu face, because now my freight is, with a company like when I was at US Express, we didn't really have to worry about freight fraud as much because we had company drivers. I know where you're at. I'm picking up a preload drop and hook, and if you're hauling something HVP, I've got definitely a lot of eyes on you. It really wasn't the same kind of concern when it was as a freight broker, when you're like, hey, I knew this carrier, we used them 6 months ago, yeah, they still should be good, but there's a freight fraud report, blah blah blah, but bro, I need to make this $100. That's the kind of mentality. That's how you get into fraud.
Yeah. So now, Thomas, I want to switch gears and talk about Motive. They just released their first of a kind first responder service vehicle for commercial drivers. What can you kind of tell us a little bit about this new vehicle?
This is fun. It's a little feature in their vehicles. It's tied into the hockey puck that they have for the ELDs. What it does is they've paired up with a company that, let me find it, Rapid SOS. There's a partnership allows you to get access to 21,000 first responder agencies. And I've had this happen before. Driver gets in an accident. You need to call EMS. You need to get on the horn. Well, let me Google his location. Let me Google what's their emergency number? Oh, what county is he in? Okay, so there's it takes about 5 to 10 minutes just to find the right dispatcher. So the cool thing with Motive is they found out that if they'll pick it up on the dash cam, there's 400 plus people who review these things constantly. They'll say accident or no accident. If it's an accident, they let you know. and then you can expedite it and immediately send the information to dispatch, make, model, vehicle, location, which is super helpful. So imagine you're a dispatcher or in law enforcement. You don't know if you need to get EMS, fire, rescue, like police, if you need to make sure there's a tower. The location's going to be really important, the nature and type of the truck. So there's a lot of ways to help out. One of the reasons was that 54% of fatal truck collisions occurred in rural areas, took an average of 15 minutes. The worst case scenario could take up to 26 minutes to arrive. And so if you're on the side of the road like that, speed is king.
Yeah, getting there as fast as you can to make sure you can help in whatever way you can, whether it's fire, EMS, whatever the case may be, is crucial for those people that are in an accident or whatever the case may be. So, Thomas, can't let you get out of here without talking about the freight market.
Yeah.
Are we seeing any signs of stabilization, or what's happening right now?
So last week it was all about tender rejections are up, spot rates are down. This week it's tender rejections are down, spot rates are up in the dry van segment. And then the reefer segment and flatbed, they're actually looking a lot better. That 12 to 13-ish% range. So it's a tale of three markets now because the dry van segment's just chugging along. We had the bump because of the hurricane and the situation, but there's not really anything structural that, at least through the end of this year, we're going to have to keep an eye on, like Thanksgiving, see if maybe there's going to be a demand driver. But we do know in the smaller segments like flatbed and reefer, there was quite a big bump, and it is outside of 5-year historical averages. We know that it's being impacted. It doesn't take a rocket science to know that FEMA needs more ice. You're going to need more home building supplies to build these areas. You're going to need more flatbeds. You're going to need more reefer trailers. So also rolling morgues to store bodies. Yes, that's right. They put them in reefers. Make sure you get a truck wash after that one, folks. But, little things like that are ways that we see demand spurred. Dry van just can't really, do the same thing. State of Freight was recently as well. Craig Fuller, Zach Strickland, a lot more optimism. Right now, consensus does feel like 2025. I remember that we'd made comments earlier that this time would be the time it gets better. Luckily, I didn't make too many of those comments. My last comment was Groundhog Day, and I got burned on that, so I learned my lesson. It turns out that early spring? I said it'd be an early thaw in rates. The groundhog lied. So that was a bunch of BS. But yeah,
you can't trust the groundhog.
You can't trust a burrowing rodent, it turns out. But yeah, so it depends on other experts you're asking. Right now, we're just punting the ball. It's Q3 earnings season right now. Martin recently released some stuff. Hunt released some stuff. It's not looking very good. So, there's nowhere to go but up. This makes this job hard because you want things to get better. You want this market to turn. And as an expert and an analyst right now, I feel pretty confident telling you that it sucks. I just don't feel very confident telling you when it will not suck because it's supply and demand. And only anyone else tell you it's truckload supply versus truckload demand. There's still too much supply. And until that right sizes, we're going to be stuck here for a minute.
Hopefully we get some resolve soon. That's all I can say. Thomas, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Last week you had community host Alan Adler on, and now you're having another community host on this week on Loaded and Rolling. Can you tell us a little bit about this week's episode?
The Spooktacular crossover event. Mary O'Connell, host of Check Call, running on ice. It's fun. We're doing some community segments. It can get hard this time of year with getting guests and everything, but we're going to talk about some of the reefer segments, some of the 3PL stuff, some freight fraud, some Spooktacular shenanigans. You want to check it out. Released on Tuesday, and you can sign up for the newsletter as well. Goes out Thursdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. Just FreightWaves.com/loaded and rolling. Look me up. I get around. I even did radio last week. Had a good conversation with the Motive folks about that. So, just stay tuned. I may write real stuff one day. I'm doing sponsored content right now, but I don't know. If you give me some ideas, I may step into the arena.
Thomas is just increasing his brand all the way around. We love to see it, Thomas. Thank you so much for being here, and we will talk to you next week.